The schoolhouse smelled of chalk dust and hope that October afternoon in 1879, sunlight streaming through windows that would soon be nothing but shattered glass and ash. Evelyn Marsh stood at the blackboard, her auburn hair catching the golden light as she wrote careful letters for her students to copy. At 28, she had left behind the suffocating propriety of Boston society to teach children who hungered for knowledge in ways her former privileged pupils never had. "Miss Evelyn, is this right?" Rebecca's voice was soft, uncertain. The 10-year-old girl held up her slate-dark eyes, searching for approval. Rebecca had arrived at the school 3 months ago, claiming to be an orphan from a wagon train attack. Something about her story never quite fit. Her clothes were too fine, her manners too polished. But Evelyn had learned not to pry too deeply into the past lives of frontier children. "Perfect sweetheart," Evelyn said, kneeling beside Rebecca's desk. The girl's handwriting was exquisite, far better than most children her age. "Your letters are beautiful. You should be proud. My mama used to say I had good hands for writing," Rebecca whispered, then quickly looked away. Before the attack, Evelyn's heart clenched. She placed a gentle hand on Rebecca's shoulder. "Your mama was right, and she would be so proud of how hard you're working." Across the room, Tommy Brennan, all freckles and mischief at 8 years old, was attempting to balance his pencil on his nose, while 7-year-old Sarah Whitmore giggled behind her primer. Evelyn had found both children living in the ruins of abandoned homesteads, Tommy after his father died in a mining accident, Sarah after cholera took her family. The territorial government paid her a pittance to educate the region's orphaned and displaced children. But Evelyn had discovered something more valuable than money purpose. "Tommy Brennan, if you can balance that pencil until I count to 10, I'll let you help me distribute tomorrow's lunch," Evelyn announced, causing the boy to freeze in concentration while the other children counted aloud. 1, 2, 3. Their voices filled the one-room schoolhouse with innocent joy. The pencil clattered to the floor at 7. But Evelyn ruffled Tommy's red hair anyway. "Close enough for effort. Sarah, would you like to help him?" Sarah beamed and nodded vigorously. These children had lost everything, yet they still found reasons to smile. It reminded Evelyn why she had left Boston, why she had walked away from a comfortable life, tutoring wealthy children who took education for granted. Here every lesson mattered. Every small victory was celebrated. "Miss Evelyn," Rebecca said quietly, Do you think we're a real family, even though we're not blood?" The question caught Evelyn off guard. She looked around the room at the 15 children in her care, orphans, cast-offs, forgotten souls who had found refuge in her classroom. "What do you think makes a real family, Rebecca?" "People who care about each other, who don't leave." "Then yes," Evelyn said firmly. "We are absolutely a real family." Rebecca smiled for the first time in weeks, and Evelyn felt that familiar warmth in her chest, the same feeling she'd experienced when her younger sister had looked at her with trust and love, before consumption took Emma away and left Evelyn with a hollow ache that only these children could fill. The first hint of smoke came through the north window just as Evelyn was preparing to dismiss class for the day. She paused, sniffing the air. October was fire season on the prairie, but the smell was too close, too thick. "Children, stay in your seats," she commanded, walking quickly to the window. What she saw made her blood turn to ice. A wall of flame was racing across the dry grassland toward Coyote Ridge, driven by howling winds that had risen from nowhere. The fire moved with unnatural speed, consuming everything in its path. Already she could see the first buildings on the edge of town beginning to smolder. "Myrrh," someone screamed from the street below. "Fire everyone out." Evelyn spun around to face her students, her mind racing. The schoolhouse sat on the hill above town, and they were directly in the fire's path. Panic would kill them faster than flames. "Everyone up," she said calmly, though her heart hammered against her ribs. We're going to walk quietly to the door. Rebecca takes Sarah's hand. Tommy helped little Marcus with his books. But as they reached the door, Evelyn saw with growing horror that the fire had moved even faster than she'd thought possible. The wooden steps of the schoolhouse were already catching smoke beginning to curl through the floorboards. The back window, she decided quickly. We'll climb out the back window. She threw open the rear window and looked down. It was an 8-foot drop to the ground, but the alternative was certain death. One by one, she helped the older children climb down, then handed the younger ones to those waiting below. Tommy, catch Marcus, she called, lowering the 5-year-old boy. I got him, Miss Evelyn. Rebecca was the last child in the room beside Sarah. Go, Evelyn urged, helping her to the window. What about you? Rebecca asked, tears streaming down her soot-stained face. I'll be right behind you, I promise. But as Rebecca dropped safely into Tommy's waiting arms, a beam crashed down behind Evelyn, sending up a shower of sparks and blocking her path to the window. The floor beneath her feet was growing hot smoke, filling her lungs. Miss Evelyn. Sarah screamed from somewhere below. Help! Evelyn's blood ran cold. In the chaos, she had lost count. Sarah wasn't outside, she was still somewhere in the building. Like, Sarah, where are you? The closet, I can't get out. The supply closet at the front of the room. Sarah must have hidden there when the fire started, too frightened to come out. Evelyn could see flames licking at the door frame. In minutes, the whole front wall would collapse. She didn't hesitate. Pulling her shawl over her head, Evelyn plunged through the smoke toward the closet. The heat was unbearable, like walking into a furnace. Her hands blistered as she grabbed the door handle and yanked it open. Sarah huddled in the corner, sobbing. Evelyn scooped her up and turned back toward the window, but the route was now completely blocked by burning debris. The roof groaned ominously above them. Hold tight, sweetheart, Evelyn whispered, looking desperately for another way out. The front door was an inferno, but there a small window near the teacher's desk, half hidden by smoke. It would be a tight fit, but it was their only chance. She stumbled through the burning classroom, clutching Sarah to her chest. Just as she reached the window, an explosion of heat and light erupted behind them. The oil lamp on her desk had shattered, sending burning oil across the floor. Evelyn's left hand caught fire as she fumbled with the window latch. The pain was excruciating, but she forced herself to keep working. The window opened, and she pushed Sarah through first. Run, she shouted. Run to the others. As Evelyn squeezed through the window herself, another beam collapsed. The massive timber clipped her head, sending her tumbling to the ground in a shower of sparks and ash. Pain exploded through her skull, and her vision blurred. The last thing she remembered was the sound of her students crying her name, their voices growing fainter as consciousness slipped away. Tommy's face appeared above her, his freckles streaked with tears and soot. Don't leave us, Miss Evelyn. Please don't leave us. Then darkness claimed her, and the world became nothing but the smell of smoke and the distant crackle of flame. Greyhawk saw the smoke from 5 miles away, a black column rising into the October sky like a funeral pyre. He urged his paint horse faster across the prairie, his weathered face grim with concern. At 32, the Kiowa tracker had seen enough destruction in his life first when the cavalry came for his people. Then during his years scouting for the army, caught between 2 worlds that would never fully accept him. The burning town of Coyote Ridge sprawled below him as he crested the hill, smoke and ash thick in the air. Most of the buildings were already lost, their wooden frames collapsing into glowing embers. People ran through the streets with buckets of water, fighting a battle they had already lost. Greyhawk had come to Coyote Ridge tracking 3 horses stolen from the McCready Ranch, but the theft seemed insignificant now. His keen eyes swept the devastation, looking for survivors who might need help. That's when he spotted them, a group of children huddled behind the remains of a stone foundation, coughing and crying. He dismounted and approached them carefully. Children could be easily spooked, especially by a man who looked like him. Greyhawk's mother had been Kiowa, his father, a French-Canadian trader, leaving him with bronze skin, high cheekbones, and black hair he wore long in the traditional way. Most white settlers viewed him with suspicion, at best open hostility, at worst. "Easy," he said softly, crouching down to their level. "I'm here to help." A red-haired boy who couldn't be more than 8 stepped protectively in front of the others. "Who are you?" "My name is Greyhawk. What's yours?" "Tommy." The boy's voice was hoarse from smoke. "This is Sarah and Rebecca and Marcus and—" He rattled off a dozen names. "Our teacher got hurt. Miss Evelyn. She saved us, but she got hurt bad." Greyhawk's attention sharpened. "Where is she?" A dark-haired girl, about 10 years old, pointed toward a figure lying motionless near the ruins of what had once been a schoolhouse. "Over there. She won't wake up." Greyhawk moved quickly to the woman's side. She was young, maybe late 20s, with auburn hair singed at the ends and angry burns on her left hand. A head wound bled sluggishly from where falling debris had struck her. But she was breathing, and her pulse was steady. "She's alive," he told the children who had followed him despite their fear. "But she needs help." "Is there a doctor in town?" "Doc Henderson," Tommy said. "But his office burned up." "He might be at the church. That's where they're taking hurt people." Greyhawk carefully lifted the unconscious teacher into his arms. She was lighter than he'd expected, and he could feel the delicate bird-like beating of her heart against his chest. Something about her face tugged at his memory. Had he seen her before? "Come on," he told the children. "Stay close." The stone church had indeed survived the fire, and its pews were filled with injured townspeople. Greyhawk found the doctor a thin, gray-haired man with kind eyes tending to a woman with severe burns. "Doctor, this woman needs help. Head injury and burns." Doc Henderson looked up, his eyes widening slightly as he took in Greyhawk's appearance. But whatever prejudices he might have harbored were set aside in the face of medical need. "Bring her here." "What happened?" "She saved these children from the schoolhouse fire." Greyhawk explained, laying Evelyn gently on a makeshift bed. Beam fell on her head. The doctor began his examination, his hands gentle but thorough. "Miss Marsh," he murmured. "Brave woman. She's been taking care of these orphan children for the territorial government." He looked up at Greyhawk. "You did right bringing her here. The head wound isn't as bad as it looks, but those burns on her hand, she may lose some function." As the doctor worked, Greyhawk became aware of hostile stares from other townspeople. A big man with a sheriff's badge approached his hand, resting meaningfully on his gun. "You can go now, Breed," the sheriff said quietly. "We'll take care of our own." The word stung, but Greyhawk had heard worse. He was about to leave when small hands grabbed his arm. "Don't go," Rebecca whispered. "Please. Everyone else always leaves." The simple plea hit Greyhawk like a physical blow. He looked down at the girl's tear-streaked face and saw his sister Ayanna, the same age when the cavalry came, the same fear in her dark eyes before a soldier's bullet cut her down. His mother's dying words echoed in his memory. "Never abandon the lost ones, my son. The spirits are watching." "I'll stay," he told Rebecca, ignoring the sheriff's scowl. "Until your teacher wakes up." He found a quiet corner of the church and settled down to wait, the children clustering around him like chicks seeking warmth. Outside, the fire continued to burn, but Greyhawk's attention was focused on the pale woman lying unconscious nearby. Something told him that when she woke up, his life and the lives of these children would never be the same. As night fell over the smoldering ruins of Coyote Ridge, Greyhawk kept his vigil. He didn't know yet about Silas Vane's mining operation, about the children who had been disappearing from settlements across the territory, or about the corruption that ran like poisoned water through every level of local government. He didn't know that Evelyn Marsh had been asking dangerous questions about her students' backgrounds or that someone had been watching her. All he knew was that a brave woman had risked her life to save children who had no one else. And now those children needed protection. The warrior instincts his Kiowa father had trained out of him during his forced service with the cavalry began to stir. Something was wrong, and Coyote Ridge had been wrong long before the fire. And Greyhawk intended to find out what. Evelyn's eyes opened to a world of pain and confusion. Her head throbbed with each heartbeat, and her left hand felt like it was still on fire. The acrid smell of smoke clung to everything: her hair, her clothes, the very air she breathed. "Miss Evelyn." Sarah's voice cut through the fog of disorientation. "She's awake, she's awake." Evelyn tried to sit up, but gentle hands pressed her back down. Her vision cleared slowly, revealing a man's face. Bronze skin, dark eyes filled with concern. Long black hair tied back with a leather cord. She had never seen him before, yet something about his presence felt safe. "Easy," he said in a deep, quiet voice. "You hit your head pretty hard." "The children." Evelyn whispered, her throat raw from smoke. "Are they—" "We're all here, Miss Evelyn," Tommy said, appearing at her side. "This is Greyhawk. He saved you." Evelyn looked around, taking in her surroundings. They were in the church, surrounded by other fire victims. Through the windows, she could see the devastation outside. Most of Coyote Ridge had been reduced to ash and charred timbers. "The schoolhouse, gone," Greyhawk said simply. "I'm sorry." Evelyn closed her eyes, feeling tears sting them. Not just for the building that could be rebuilt, but for all the books, the slates, the precious supplies she had scraped together to give these children an education. Everything was gone. "What happened to your hand?" Rebecca asked softly. Evelyn looked down at her left hand, now wrapped in clean bandages. She could feel the angry heat of burns beneath the cloth, and when she tried to flex her fingers, only some of them responded. The doctor had been right. She had lost function in 2 fingers, though she didn't know it yet. "It got burned in the fire," she said, forcing a smile for Rebecca's sake. "But it'll heal." Greyhawk's expression told her he suspected otherwise, but he said nothing. Instead, he helped her sit up slowly, supporting her weight with surprising gentleness for such a strong man. "Doc Henderson wants to keep you here tonight for observation," he said. "Head injuries can be tricky. The children need—" "I'll watch them," Greyhawk interrupted. "They'll be safe." Evelyn studied his face, trying to understand why a stranger would make such an offer. In her experience, men, especially men on the frontier, didn't volunteer to care for other people's children. There was usually an angle, a hidden cost. "Why?" she asked directly. Greyhawk was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes distant. "I had a sister once, Ayana. She was about Rebecca's age when—" He stopped, jaw tightening. "Let's just say I know what it's like to be alone." Something in his voice told Evelyn not to press for details. Instead, she looked around at her 15 students, her children really, and felt a crushing weight of responsibility. How was she going to take care of them now? Where would they live? What would they eat? "Miss Evelyn," Marcus whispered, the 5-year-old climbing carefully onto her makeshift bed. "I'm scared." She wrapped her good arm around him, pulling him close. "I know, sweetheart. I'm scared too. But we're together, and that's what matters." As if summoned by her words, a new voice cut through the murmur of conversation in the church. "Well, this is a damned shame." Evelyn looked up to see a well-dressed man approaching, tall, broad-shouldered, with silver hair and a neatly trimmed beard. His clothes were expensive, unmarked by smoke or ash, and he carried himself with the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Mr. Vane," Doc Henderson said, rising quickly. "I didn't expect to see you here." Silas Vane owned half the businesses in Coyote Ridge, including the largest mine. He was also the closest thing the town had to a mayor, though he'd never officially held the title. Evelyn had met him only once, when he donated money to buy primers for the school. Something about him had made her uncomfortable then, though she couldn't pinpoint why. Terrible thing, losing the schoolhouse. Vane said, his voice carrying just the right note of sympathy. These poor children. Where will they go now? They'll stay with me, Evelyn said firmly, struggling to sit up straighter despite her injuries. We'll find another place. Vane's smile was kind, but something flickered behind his eyes. Miss Marsh, you're injured. You can't possibly care for 15 children in your condition. And frankly, the territorial government's funding for the school died with the building. Evelyn's blood ran cold. What do you mean? I mean, there's no money to rebuild, no money to pay your salary. These children need proper homes with families who can feed and clothe them. Vane's gaze swept over the huddled group. I've already spoken to several mining families. They're willing to take in the older boys as apprentices. The girls can work as domestics. It's honest work. No. The word came out harder than Evelyn intended. These children are not laborers. They're students. They have a right to education, to childhood. They have a right to survival. Vane interrupted, his mask of sympathy slipping slightly. Times are hard, Miss Marsh. Sentiment won't feed hungry mouths. Greyhawk, who had been silent through the exchange, suddenly straightened. Evelyn saw his hand move instinctively toward the knife on his belt and then stop. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. These children don't look like they want to go anywhere. Vane's attention shifted to Greyhawk for the first time, and Evelyn saw naked disgust flash across his features. I don't believe we've been introduced. Greyhawk, I track for the army sometimes. Well, Mr. Greyhawk, this doesn't concern you. These are white children, and they need proper Christian homes. Vane's voice carried an unmistakable warning. I suggest you move along. The tension in the church was suddenly thick enough to cut. Evelyn could see other townspeople watching, waiting to see how the confrontation would play out. Some looked sympathetic, but more wore expressions of hostility as they stared at Greyhawk. Rebecca suddenly spoke up, her young voice cutting through the adult tension. I don't want to work in the mines. I want to stay with Miss Evelyn. Of course you do, child. Vane said, his tone patronizing. But sometimes we have to do things we don't want to do. It builds character. Something about the way he looked at Rebecca made Evelyn's skin crawl. There was a hunger there quickly hidden that had nothing to do with Christian charity or proper homes. The children stay with me. Evelyn repeated, this time with steel in her voice. I'll find a way to support them. Vane's expression hardened. Miss Marsh, you're being unreasonable. These children need structure discipline. Look at what your permissive methods have produced, a schoolhouse full of orphans and outcasts. Now it's all gone up in smoke. Perhaps it's a sign. A sign of what? Greyhawk asked quietly. That some experiments are doomed to failure. Vane's smile was cold now, all pretense of sympathy gone. Miss Marsh, you have 3 days to recover from your injuries. After that, if you can't provide proper accommodations for these children, they'll be placed with suitable families. End of discussion. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Greyhawk? I'd be careful about interfering in matters that don't concern you. Accidents happen all too frequently on the frontier. The threat was unmistakable. Vane strode out of the church, leaving behind an uncomfortable silence. Well, Doc Henderson said finally, clearly trying to lighten the mood. That was unpleasant. But Evelyn barely heard him. Her mind was racing, trying to process what had just happened. Vane's reaction had been too quick, too organized. Almost as if he'd been expecting this opportunity. Greyhawk, she said quietly. I need to ask you something. The fire, did anyone see how it started? He met her eyes, and she saw that he'd been thinking the same thing. Prairie fires are common this time of year. Dry grass, wind, maybe lightning. But this one moved too fast, too directed. And he hesitated. I tracked the burn pattern before coming here. It started in 3 different places, all upwind of the town. Evelyn felt sick. You think someone said it deliberately. I think we should be very careful about who we trust, Greyhawk said grimly. Around them, the children huddled closer together, sensing the adult tension without understanding its source. Rebecca looked up at Evelyn with those dark, intelligent eyes. Miss Evelyn, what's going to happen to us? Evelyn pulled the girl close with her good arm, her injured hand throbbing with each heartbeat. She didn't know the answer to that question, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty: she would die before she let Silas Vane get his hands on these children. We're going to stay together, she said firmly. All of us, I promise. It was a promise she had no idea how to keep. But as she met Greyhawk's steady gaze over the children's heads, she saw something there that gave her hope. He believed her. More than that, he was prepared to help her keep that promise, even if it killed them both. The second night after the fire, Greyhawk sat watch outside the church while Evelyn and the children slept inside. His paint horse Stormwalker grazed quietly nearby ears, constantly moving as he monitored the darkness for threats. Greyhawk had learned long ago to trust the animal's senses more than his own. The ruins of Coyote Ridge stretched out below him, still smoldering in places. Most of the surviving townspeople had moved on, heading to relatives in other settlements or starting the long journey to San Francisco. Those who remained were either too poor to leave, or had too much invested in the town to abandon it, or they had other reasons for staying. Greyhawk had spent the day asking questions, and the answers troubled him. 3 other schoolhouses in neighboring settlements had burned in the past year, always when prairie fires struck with unusual ferocity. Always when the territorial government was about to inspect the schools. And always when children had been recently orphaned or abandoned. Stormwalker's ears suddenly swiveled forward, and Greyhawk tensed. Someone was approaching through the darkness, trying to move quietly, but failing. Greyhawk's hand found his knife as he melted into the shadows beside the church. The figure that emerged from the ruins was small-hunched, moving with the careful steps of someone trying not to be seen. As it came closer, Greyhawk realized it was a boy, maybe 13 or 14, with the hollow-eyed look of someone who had seen too much, looking for something. Greyhawk asked softly, stepping out of the shadows. The boy spun around, fear written across his gaunt face. He was dirty, underfed, with the kind of desperate wariness that came from living on the streets. Please, mister, I ain't causing trouble. I heard there was a teacher lady with some kids. Thought maybe what? The boy's eyes filled with tears he was too proud to shed. My sister. She's 8 years old. We've been living rough since our ma died, and yesterday some men came. Said they'd take care of her, give her a proper home. But something wasn't right about them. They wouldn't let me come too, said I was too old, too set in my ways. Greyhawk's blood ran cold. What did these men look like? One was real big with mean eyes. The other was dressed fancy with a beard. They had a wagon heading toward the mines. They took 3 other kids too, all from families that died in the fire. Silas Vane. It had to be. Greyhawk's mind raced, putting together pieces of a puzzle that was more horrifying than he'd imagined. What's your name, son? Daniel. Daniel Murphy. My sister's name is Emma. She's got yellow hair and she's scared of the dark. Please, mister, do you know where they took her? Greyhawk made a decision that would change everything. Come with me, Daniel. There's someone you need to meet. Inside the church, Evelyn was awake, despite the late hour, her injured hand keeping her from sleep. She sat up when Greyhawk entered with the boy, immediately recognizing the signs of trauma and desperation she'd seen in so many of her own students. Daniel, this is Miss Evelyn. Greyhawk said quietly. Tell her what you told me. As the boy repeated his story, Evelyn's face grew pale with anger and understanding. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Greyhawk, how many children did Vane say he'd found homes for? He mentioned several mining families were willing to take in workers. Child workers, In the mines. Evelyn's voice was tight with controlled fury. That's not finding homes that's slavery. Rebecca stirred in her sleep nearby, and Evelyn lowered her voice. When I first came to Coyote Ridge, I tried to track down records for some of my students. Where they came from, if they had any living relatives. The territorial office in Tucson kept giving me excuses, lost paperwork files, destroyed in accidents, that sort of thing. You think Vane was involved? I think Vane has been collecting orphaned children for months, maybe years. The fire just gave him an excuse to take them openly. Evelyn struggled to stand, ignoring the pain in her head and hand. We have to find Daniel's sister. We have to find all of them. Greyhawk admired her courage, but he'd seen what men like Vane were capable of. Evelyn, you're injured. The children need to know they're safe. All of them. Not just the ones lucky enough to be with us. She looked down at her bandaged hand, flexing the fingers that still worked. I became a teacher because I believe every child deserves a chance. I won't abandon that belief now. Daniel wiped his nose on his sleeve. You really think you can get Emma back? I know we can, Evelyn said with more confidence than she felt. But we'll need help. Greyhawk nodded slowly. The mine compound is heavily guarded. Vane has at least a dozen men working for him, maybe more. But I know the country, and I know how to move unseen. What about the law? Surely Sheriff Bradford works for Vane. Daniel interrupted bitterly. Everyone knows it. My ma used to say the only law in Coyote Ridge is whatever Silas Vane wants it to be. Evelyn sank back down, the enormity of what they were facing beginning to hit her. They were talking about going up against one of the most powerful men in the territory, a man who apparently had the sheriff in his pocket and enough resources to make problems disappear permanently. There is someone who might help, Greyhawk said thoughtfully. Catherine Vane. Vane's wife. I've seen her in town. She doesn't look happy. Women trapped in bad marriages sometimes. He shrugged. Sometimes they're willing to help when they see a way out. Evelyn considered this. It was dangerous. If Catherine Vane couldn't be trusted, they'd be walking into a trap. But if she could be convinced to help, how do we approach her without Vane knowing? The general store. She comes in every Tuesday morning alone. Always buys the same things, flour, sugar, coffee. Never talks to anyone, but she watches everything. Tuesday, that's tomorrow. Greyhawk nodded. You talk to her, woman to woman. Meanwhile, I'll scout the mine compound, see what we're up against. And if Mrs. Vane won't help, then we find another way. But we don't give up. Greyhawk's voice carried the conviction of someone who had lost too much already. Those children are counting on us. Rebecca suddenly sat up, rubbing her eyes. Miss Evelyn, why is everyone awake? Evelyn quickly moved to comfort her, pulling the girl close. Just talking, sweetheart. Go back to sleep. But Rebecca's dark eyes were alert, intelligent. Is it about the man who wants to take us away? Mr. Vane? The question caught Evelyn off guard. What do you know about Mr. Vane? I've seen him before I came to your school. Rebecca's voice was small, uncertain. He scares me. Where did you see him? Greyhawk asked gently. Rebecca looked between the adults as if trying to decide whether to trust them with something important. Finally, she whispered, at the place where they kept us. Before the wagon train story. He came to look at us sometimes to pick out the ones he wanted. The blood drained from Evelyn's face. Rebecca, are you saying there was no wagon train attack, that you came from somewhere else? The girl nodded, tears beginning to flow. There were lots of us. In a big house with bars on the windows. They said if we were good, we'd get to go to nice families. But Emma Daniel's sister, she said they were lying. She said they were going to make us work in the dark places under the ground. Greyhawk and Evelyn exchanged looks of horror. This was worse than they'd imagined. Vane wasn't just collecting orphans, he was running some kind of systematic operation, gathering children from multiple sources. Rebecca, Evelyn said carefully, do you remember where this house was? North of here. Maybe a day's ride, there was a big rock that looked like a sleeping bear. Gray Hawk knew the landmark. Devil's Throne. The Kiowa called it a sacred place, where his people once communed with spirits. It was isolated, perfect for hiding illegal activities. How did you get away? Daniel asked. I ran. During a storm. Got lost for 2 days before I found the road to town. Made up the wagon train story because I was scared they'd send me back if they knew the truth. Evelyn pulled Rebecca closer, her heart breaking for what this child had endured. But she also felt a spark of hope. If Rebecca had escaped once she knew the layout of Vane's operation, she could help them plan a rescue. Rebecca, I need you to be very brave and tell us everything you remember about that place. Can you do that? The girl nodded solemnly. If it will help get Emma and the others back. As Rebecca began to describe the compound near Devil's Throne, the layout, the guards, the daily routines, Gray Hawk felt the familiar weight of an impossible mission settling on his shoulders. But this time was different. This time he wasn't fighting for army gold or territorial politics. This time he was fighting for something that mattered. The general store smelled of coffee beans and leather, a comforting contrast to the lingering scent of smoke that permeated the rest of Coyote Ridge. Evelyn positioned herself near the bolts of fabric, pretending to examine a length of blue cotton while keeping an eye on the door. Her injured hand throbbed constantly now, making even simple tasks difficult. But she forced herself to ignore the pain. At precisely 9 o'clock, Catherine Vane entered the store. Evelyn's first impression was surprise. Vane's wife looked nothing like she'd expected. Instead of the pampered society woman she'd imagined, Catherine appeared fragile, almost ethereal. She was perhaps 40, with graying auburn hair and intelligent green eyes that held a deep sadness. Her dress was expensive but somber, and she moved with the careful precision of someone trying to remain invisible. Mrs. Vane. Evelyn approached cautiously. I'm Evelyn Marsh. I taught at the school. Catherine's head snapped up, fear flashing in her eyes. I'm sorry about what happened to your school. The children. It must have been terrible. There was genuine sympathy in her voice, which gave Evelyn hope. Mrs. Vane, I wonder if I could speak with you privately about the children. Catherine glanced nervously around the store. The proprietor, Mr. Jenkins, was busy with inventory in the back room, but she still lowered her voice. I don't think that would be wise. My husband has very strong opinions about proper procedures for dealing with orphan children. I know. That's what I want to talk about. Something in Evelyn's tone made Catherine look at her more closely. What do you mean? Evelyn took a calculated risk. Mrs. Vane, how long have children been disappearing from settlements around here? Catherine's face went white. She set down the bag of flour she'd been holding, her hands trembling slightly. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Just like you know that the fires haven't been accidents. Evelyn stepped closer, keeping her voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Vane, I think your husband is using those children as laborers in his mines. I think he's been doing it for years. For a moment, Catherine looked like she might faint. Then she grabbed Evelyn's arm with surprising strength. You don't understand. If he finds out we've talked, he won't. But I need your help to stop this. Catherine's eyes filled with tears. You can't stop it. No one can. He's too powerful, has too many people working for him. Even if you went to the territorial authorities, half of them are in his pocket. Then we don't go through official channels. Evelyn's voice was steady, determined. Mrs. Vane, I know this is frightening, but those children need someone to stand up for them. Someone who knows the truth. Catherine was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. I had a daughter once. Rebecca. She would have been 10 years old now. Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. Would have been. She died when she was 3. Fever. Silas. Silas blamed me. Said I was too weak to protect her, too weak to be a proper mother. Catherine's voice was flat, emotionless. That's when he started the other business. Said he was helping orphan children find homes, but I knew better. How long has this been going on? 7 years. Maybe 8. At first, it was just a few children from families that died in mining accidents. Then he started expanding, working with people in other towns. There's a network of them men who identify vulnerable children and arrange for them to disappear during tragedies. Evelyn felt sick. The fires, cover stories, make it look like accidents, tragedies, then swoop in to rescue the survivors. Catherine's laugh was bitter. My husband fancies himself a philanthropist. Says he's giving these children purpose, teaching them the value of hard work. Where are they being held? Catherine hesitated, then seemed to come to a decision. There are 2 places. The compound near Devil's Throne, that's where they're sorted and prepared. The younger ones, the girls, they go to work in his house or get sold to other families as domestics. The boys, the strong ones, they go to the deep mines. Deep mines. Illegal shafts. Too dangerous for adult miners, but children can fit into smaller spaces. The mortality rate. Catherine closed her eyes. I don't know the exact numbers. Silas doesn't tell me everything. Evelyn gripped the fabric bolt to steady herself. This was worse than she'd imagined, not just child labor, but systematic abuse and murder disguised as philanthropy. Mrs. Vane, I need your help to expose this, to stop it. I can't. If he finds out I've told you. Catherine's voice broke. You don't know what he's capable of. What he's done to people who crossed him. What about the marshal? Surely there's someone in law enforcement who isn't corrupted. Catherine considered this. Marshal Morrison, maybe. He's new to the territory, doesn't owe Silas any favors yet. But getting word to him without Silas knowing, leave that to me. Just tell me, is there a way to get the children out? Some kind of weakness in his security? Thursday nights. That's when Silas meets with his investors in Tucson. Most of the guards go with him. He doesn't trust them alone with his business partners. The compounds are left with minimal security. This Thursday, Catherine nodded. But Miss Marsh, you have to understand, even if you rescue some of the children, there will be others. This network extends across 3 territories. Stopping one operation won't end it. Then we'll stop them all one at a time if necessary. Evelyn's voice carried a determination that surprised even her. But it starts with getting those children to safety. Catherine stared at her for a long moment, then reached into her reticule and pulled out a small brass key. The compound near Devil's Throne. This opens the main gate. I've had it for years, but I never had the courage to use it. Evelyn took the key, feeling its weight like a promise. Mrs. Vane, when this is over, you'll be free of him. I promise you that. Catherine's laugh was hollow. Miss Marsh, you don't understand. I'm not just his wife, I'm his accomplice. I've known about this for years and done nothing. How many children have suffered because of my cowardice? Cowardice, Mrs. Vane, you're giving us the means to stop him. That's not cowardice, that's redemption. Tears flowed freely down Catherine's face now. He killed her, you know. My Rebecca. Not the fever him. She saw something she shouldn't have seen, asked questions she shouldn't have asked. He couldn't risk her talking when she got older. The revelation hit Evelyn like a physical blow. I'm so sorry. Help them, Catherine whispered. Help all of them. For Rebecca and for every child who comes after. As Catherine gathered her purchases and prepared to leave, she paused at the door. "Miss Marsh, be careful who you trust. My husband has eyes and ears everywhere, even among people you'd never suspect." Then she was gone, leaving Evelyn alone with the weight of what she'd learned and the small brass key that might hold the salvation of dozens of innocent children. But as Evelyn left the store, she didn't notice the figure watching from the shadows across the street, a man with a sheriff's badge, who had heard enough to know that Silas Vane's carefully constructed empire was about to face its greatest threat. And Deputy Matthews knew exactly what his boss would want him to do about it. The abandoned homestead sat 3 miles outside what remained of Coyote Ridge, its weathered walls offering blessed shelter from the constant wind. Greyhawk had found it while scouting, and it seemed perfect for their needs, close enough to town for supplies, but isolated enough to avoid unwanted attention. Evelyn sat on the front steps, flexing her injured hand and trying to process everything Catherine Vane had told her. The brass key felt heavy in her pocket, weighted with the hopes of children she'd never met and the crushing responsibility of the mission ahead. The compound is exactly where Rebecca said it would be. Greyhawk reported, settling down beside her. He'd spent the afternoon scouting Devil's Throne, and his expression was grim. But it's not just a holding facility, it's a full operation. Barracks, workshops, even a small smelting facility. Vane's not just using child labor, he's running an entire shadow economy. How many children? Hard to tell from a distance, but I counted at least 30. Maybe more in the underground areas. Greyhawk's jaw tightened. Some of them can't be more than 6 or 7 years old. Evelyn closed her eyes, feeling sick. Catherine gave me this. She pulled out the key. It opens the main gate. She also said Thursday night is our best chance Vane will be in Tucson with most of his security. That's tomorrow night. I know it's soon, but it's not soon enough. Greyhawk interrupted. I saw them bringing up ore carts from the deep mines. Some of those carts were so heavy it took 4 adult men to move them. But the children going down? He shook his head. They're not coming back up. The implication hung between them like a death sentence. Children were dying in those mines, worked to death, or killed in cave-ins, and their bodies were probably being buried somewhere in the desert where no one would ever find them. We'll need wagons, Evelyn said, forcing herself to focus on practical matters. Something to transport 30 children. Already thought of that. There's a freight company in town, Davidson's. The owner lost his own son in the fire. He might be willing to help. And after we get them out, where do we take them? Greyhawk was quiet for a moment. There's a Kiowa band camped about 50 miles north of here. My cousin Swift Arrow leads them. They don't have much, but they understand what it means to protect children who have nowhere else to go. Would they really take in white children? They took me in when the army was done with me. Greyhawk said simply, Swift Arrow believes children belong to the whole tribe, not just their birth parents. Blood doesn't matter as much as need. It was a beautiful sentiment, but Evelyn knew the practical challenges. The territorial government will never accept that arrangement. They'll want the children returned to white society. Then we make sure they have a white society to return to. We expose Vane's network, get law enforcement involved, create a system that actually protects orphaned children instead of exploiting them. That could take years. Then it takes years. But those children will be safe while we work on it. Evelyn looked at Greyhawk with growing respect. He wasn't just talking about a rescue mission, he was talking about completely dismantling a criminal network and rebuilding the systems meant to protect vulnerable children. It was an enormous undertaking, one that would require tremendous courage and persistence. Why are you doing this? She asked. You could walk away, take my children somewhere safe and forget about the rest. Greyhawk was quiet for a long time, staring out at the darkening prairie. When I was 12, the cavalry came to our camp. They said they were relocating us to a reservation. But what they really wanted was the young people boys to work in the copper mines, girls to serve in officers' households. My sister Ayanna was 8. Beautiful, smart, full of life. He paused, lost in painful memory. I tried to protect her. Got between her and a soldier who was dragging her toward a wagon. The soldier shot me, left me for dead. But I survived. Ayanna didn't. She died in those mines 6 months later. I'm so sorry. I spent years angry. Angry at the cavalry, at the government, at myself for failing to save her. Then I met my cousin, Swift Arrow, and he taught me something important. Anger without purpose is just poison. But anger with purpose can change the world. Greyhawk turned to look at Evelyn directly. You asked why I'm doing this. I'm doing it because every child in Vane's compound is my sister. Every child who disappears, every life that gets thrown away for profit, they're all Ayanna. And this time, I'm not walking away. The conviction in his voice was absolute. And Evelyn felt something shift inside her chest. She'd thought she understood the stakes, but hearing Greyhawk's story made her realize this was about more than just rescuing children. It was about redemption for both of them. All right, she said quietly. Tomorrow night we end this. They spent the next hour planning, going over every detail they could think of. Greyhawk would approach Davidson about the wagons, while Evelyn worked on getting word to Marshal Morrison. Rebecca and Daniel would help identify the rescued children and figure out which ones had families to return to. As they talked, Evelyn's students played quietly nearby, their voices, a constant reminder of what they were fighting for. Tommy and Sarah had built a fort out of old fence posts, while Marcus napped in Rebecca's lap. Despite everything they'd been through, they still found ways to be children. Miss Evelyn, Rebecca said softly, I'm scared about tomorrow. Evelyn moved to sit beside her, careful not to wake Marcus. It's okay to be scared, sweetheart. I'm scared too. What if something goes wrong? What if Mr. Vane catches us? Then we deal with whatever happens. But Rebecca, you don't have to come with us. You could stay here with Tommy and the others. No. Rebecca's voice was firm. Those kids are scared and alone. They need someone who understands, someone who's been where they are. Besides, she looked up at Evelyn with eyes far too old for her 10-year-old face. You taught me that families stick together. All of us are family now. Greyhawk nodded approvingly. She's right, and she knows the compound layout better than anyone. As night fell over the homestead, they settled in to wait for morning. But none of them noticed the rider watching from the ridge above, or the way he turned his horse and galloped back toward town as soon as he'd seen enough. Deputy Matthews had work to do, and Silas Vane would want to know about it immediately. The trap was already being set. Thursday dawned gray and cold, with storm clouds gathering on the western horizon. Evelyn woke before sunrise, her injured hand aching with the changing weather. Around her, the children still slept curled together for warmth in the abandoned homestead. Greyhawk was already awake, checking his weapons with the methodical precision of someone preparing for war. He'd acquired a rifle somewhere, Evelyn didn't ask where, and his knife gleamed sharp and ready at his belt. Davidson agreed to help, he said quietly. He'll have 2 wagons ready after dark. Says his boy would have been about Tommy's age now. Any word from Marshal Morrison? Catherine managed to get a message to him. He's riding in from Tucson with a federal marshal and a territorial investigator. Should arrive sometime tomorrow. A day late for the rescue, but in time to arrest Vane and his people when they return from their meeting, assuming we succeed tonight. The assumption hung between them like a prayer. So many things could go wrong, and they could be walking into a trap. The children might be too frightened to trust them. Vane might return early from Tucson, but they couldn't afford to wait for perfect conditions. Children were dying every day. Miss Evelyn. Sarah appeared at her side, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Is today the day we help the other kids? Yes, sweetheart. Are you ready? Sarah nodded solemnly. At 7 years old, she had already seen more hardship than most adults. The fire had taken her remaining innocence, but it had also revealed a core of steel that Evelyn found both heartbreaking and inspiring. One by one, the other children woke and prepared for the day. They all knew what was happening. Evelyn and Greyhawk had been honest about the dangers, believing the children deserved to understand what they were risking and why. "I want to come with you," Tommy announced as Evelyn checked her supplies. "I'm strong. I can help." "I know you're strong," Evelyn said gently. "But I need you to do something even more important. I need you to take care of the younger children here. Can you do that for me?" Tommy's chest puffed out with pride at being given such responsibility. "Yes, ma'am. Nobody gets past me." As the day wore on, Evelyn found herself studying each of her students, memorizing their faces. If something went wrong tonight, these might be her last hours with them. The thought was unbearable, but it also strengthened her resolve. These children had already lost too much; they wouldn't lose their chosen family too. The sun was setting when Davidson arrived with the wagons. He was a big man with calloused hands and eyes that held the hollow look of someone who had lost everything that mattered. But his voice was steady as he spoke to Greyhawk. "These'll hold 20 kids each, maybe more if they're small. I've loaded blankets and water, some food for the journey. We appreciate this, Mr. Davidson. I know it's dangerous. My boy Jimmy was 8 when the fire took him." Davidson said simply. If there's other children out there who need help, well, it's what he would have wanted. As full darkness fell, their small rescue party prepared to depart. Greyhawk would drive one wagon, Evelyn the other. Rebecca would come to help identify and calm the children, while Daniel would assist with any who might be too frightened or injured to walk. "Remember," Greyhawk said as they prepared to leave, "we get in, get the children, and get out. No heroics, no unnecessary risks. If something goes wrong, we scatter and meet at the Kiowa camp." Evelyn nodded, though privately she wondered if she'd have the strength to abandon children if things went badly. The thought of leaving even one child behind was almost as unbearable as the thought of losing her own students. The ride to Devil's Throne took 2 hours through rough country. They traveled without lanterns, relying on Greyhawk's knowledge of the terrain and the faint starlight to guide them. The night was eerily quiet. No coyotes, no night birds, as if even the wildlife sensed something dangerous in the air. The compound appeared as a dark blot against the darker sky, lit by a few scattered torches. Greyhawk had been right about the reduced security. They could see only 2 guards patrolling the perimeter, and both looked bored and inattentive. "There," Rebecca whispered, pointing to a low building near the center of the compound. "That's where they keep the new ones. The older kids are in the building next to it." Greyhawk studied the layout, comparing it to what he'd observed during his scouting mission. "The guards make their rounds every 20 minutes. We'll have that long to get inside and start moving children." They waited until the guards passed, and then Greyhawk crept forward to deal with the main gate. Catherine's key turned smoothly in the lock, and the heavy iron barrier swung open on well-oiled hinges. The compound was a maze of buildings and work areas designed to maximize efficiency in the exploitation of child labor. Evelyn felt sick as they passed workshops, where tiny hands had clearly been assembling mining equipment, living quarters that were little better than prison cells. The first building Rebecca had indicated was locked, but Daniel made quick work of the simple mechanism with a piece of wire. Inside, they found a dozen children, ranging in age from 6 to 12, sleeping on thin mattresses on the floor. "Wake up," Rebecca whispered, moving among them with surprising authority. "We're here to take you somewhere safe." The children stirred, confused and frightened. Some cried out before Rebecca and Evelyn could calm them. One little boy, maybe 7 years old, cowered in the corner. "Please don't take me to the deep holes," he whimpered. "I'll work harder, I promise." Evelyn's heart broke as she knelt beside him. "We're not taking you to work anywhere. We're taking you away from here to people who will take care of you. You're lying. All the grown-ups lie. It was Rebecca who broke through his fear. Look at me, Peter. It's Rebecca. I was here before. Remember, I escaped, and now I came back for you. These people helped me, and they're going to help all of us. Recognition dawned in the boy's eyes, followed by desperate hope. Rebecca, you really came back. I promised I would if I could. Now come on, we don't have much time. Getting the children organized and moving took precious minutes, but gradually they formed a quiet line heading for the wagons. Greyhawk had already emptied the second building, and Daniel was helping a girl with an injured leg. That's when they heard the shout from the guard tower. Intruders, someone's in the compound. The night exploded with activity. Guards poured out of buildings Evelyn hadn't even seen, carrying torches and rifles. Somewhere in the distance, dogs began barking. "Run!" Greyhawk shouted. "Get to the wagons!" But as they reached the gate, more armed men appeared, blocking their escape route. The children screamed and scattered, some hiding behind buildings, others running back toward the barracks. And through the chaos walked Silas Vane, flanked by Sheriff Bradford and Deputy Matthews. His face was calm, almost amused, as he surveyed the scene. "Miss Evelyn Marsh," he said pleasantly. "I have to say, I'm impressed by your dedication, though not surprised by your poor judgment." Evelyn realized with sick certainty that they had walked into a trap. Vane had never gone to Tucson. He'd known about their plan all along. "You were expecting us?" "Of course. My dear wife has many virtues, but subtlety isn't one of them. Did you really think she could approach you without my knowledge?" Greyhawk stepped protectively in front of Evelyn and Rebecca, his hand on his knife. But they were outnumbered 10-1, and most of Vane's men carried rifles. "Smart move, Breed." Deputy Matthews sneered. "But you're still going to hang for this." "Actually," Vane said thoughtfully, "I think shooting while trying to escape would be more believable. These tragic accidents do happen on the frontier." It was then that Rebecca did something completely unexpected. She stepped out from behind Greyhawk and looked directly at Silas Vane. "Hello, Father." The words hit like a thunderbolt. Evelyn stared at Rebecca in shock, understanding flooding through her. The fine clothes when she'd first arrived, the educated mannerisms, the way she'd known so much about Vane's operation. Rebecca wasn't just another escaped victim. She was Silas Vane's daughter. For the first time since Evelyn had known him, Vane's composure cracked. His face went white and his hands trembled as he stared at the girl he'd thought was dead. "That's impossible," he whispered. "Rebecca died. The fever. Mother faked my death," Rebecca said calmly. "She gave me to a traveling family, told them I was an orphan who needed a new start. She couldn't bear to watch you turn me into one of your workers." The revelation was spreading through the armed men like wildfire. Evelyn could see doubt and confusion on their faces. This wasn't part of the plan they'd been sold. "You're lying," Vane said, but his voice lacked conviction. "My daughter is dead. Catherine told me. Mother told you what you needed to hear to keep me safe." Rebecca reached into her pocket and pulled out a small silver locket. "She gave me this before she sent me away. It has your picture in it from when you were young, before you became a monster." Vane stared at the locket, and Evelyn saw his entire world collapsing behind his eyes. Everything he'd built, everything he'd justified to himself, was crumbling in the face of his daughter's condemnation. "Rebecca," he said brokenly, I thought I was building something for you, for your future. You never meant for me to see it," Rebecca finished. "But I did see it. I lived it. Do you know what it's like to be locked in a room with 30 other children, all of us wondering if we'll die in the mines tomorrow? Do you know what it's like to watch your friends disappear and never come back?" Tears were streaming down the 10-year-old's face, but her voice remained steady. I know you're my father, but I also know that some things are more important than blood. These people, she gestured to Evelyn and Greyhawk. They're my real family now. They chose to love me, not use me. The moment stretched like eternity, father and daughter staring at each other across a chasm of broken trust and shattered dreams. Then gunfire erupted from the darkness beyond the compound. Marshal Morrison had arrived. The battle for the compound was brief but fierce. Morrison had brought more men than expected, territorial marshals, federal agents, even a detachment of cavalry. Vane's guards, caught between the attacking lawmen and the moral crisis of Rebecca's revelation, surrendered quickly. But in the chaos, several of the rescued children had fled into the mine tunnels beneath the compound. Evelyn could hear them crying in the darkness below, too frightened to come out. I'm going down there, she told Greyhawk as the last of Vane's men were being arrested above. It's dangerous. Those tunnels are unstable. Those children are more frightened than we are. They need someone they can trust. Greyhawk studied her face, then nodded. I'm coming with you. The mine tunnels were a nightmare of narrow passages and unstable supports. Evelyn could smell the fear sweat of terrified children. One could hear their muffled sobs echoing through the darkness. Her injured hand made it difficult to maintain her grip on the rope ladder, but she forced herself to keep going. Hello, she called softly into the darkness. My name is Miss Evelyn. I'm a teacher. I'm here to help you. A small voice answered from somewhere ahead. Are you going to make us work? No, sweetheart. No one is ever going to make you work in these tunnels again. We're here to take you somewhere safe. Gradually, the children emerged from their hiding places. 5 of them ranging in age from maybe 6 to 10. They were thin, dirty, with the hollow eyes of children who had seen too much. But they were alive. That's it, Evelyn said encouragingly as she helped the youngest boy toward the ladder. You're safe now. That's when they heard the ominous creaking from above. The main support beam, weakened by years of poor maintenance, and the vibrations from the recent activity, was beginning to fail. Move! Greyhawk shouted, scooping up 2 of the children and pushing them toward the ladder. Evelyn grabbed the remaining children, her injured hand, screaming in protest as she lifted them one by one toward the surface. Greyhawk was right behind her, carrying the last child when the tunnel ceiling began to collapse. A shower of rocks and dirt rained down, followed by increasingly large chunks of stone and timber. Greyhawk thrust the child he was carrying up toward waiting hands above, then turned back for Evelyn. Go, she shouted. I'm right behind you. But as she reached for the ladder, her injured hand gave out. She fell back into the tunnel just as a massive beam crashed down, sealing the passage. Darkness and silence closed around her like a tomb. Above, Greyhawk clawed at the rubble with his bare hands, desperate to reach her. Evelyn, can you hear me? Her voice came back faintly, muffled by tons of stone and earth. I'm alive, but I'm trapped. Marshal Morrison appeared at Greyhawk's side, assessing the situation with professional calm. How long can she survive down there? Depends on airflow and whether the tunnel's completely sealed. Maybe hours, maybe less. It was Rebecca who provided the solution. There's another entrance, she said quietly. On the far side of the compound. It connects to the main tunnel system. Greyhawk was already moving before she finished speaking. Show me. The alternate entrance was nearly hidden by decades of overgrowth. But Rebecca remembered it from her time in the compound. Greyhawk squeezed through the narrow opening, a torch in one hand and a coil of rope over his shoulder. The tunnels were a maze, but he followed the sound of Evelyn's voice through the darkness. When he finally found her, she was sitting in a small cavity created by fallen timbers, her face pale but determined. What took you so long? She asked with forced lightness. Got lost, he replied, securing the rope around her waist. Can you climb? Evelyn looked at her mangled left hand, then at Greyhawk's steady gaze. I can try. The climb out was agonizing. but Greyhawk's strength and encouragement carried her through. When they finally emerged into the dawn light, Rebecca was waiting with tears streaming down her face. "I thought I'd lost another family," she whispered as Evelyn pulled her close. "Never," Evelyn said firmly. "Families don't abandon each other." Around them, the compound was being systematically dismantled by federal agents. Marshal Morrison approached his expression grim but satisfied. "We found records," he said. "Names, dates, transactions. This network extends across 3 territories and involves dozens of prominent citizens. It's going to take years to prosecute everyone involved." "What about Vane? He'll hang." "The evidence is overwhelming, and several of his former employees are already cooperating in exchange for reduced sentences." Evelyn looked around at the children they'd rescued, 37 in total, ranging in age from 5 to 14. Some would have families to return to, but many were truly orphaned. They would need homes, education, medical care. Marshal Morrison. She said, an idea forming in her mind. What will happen to this land, to Vane's assets? Seized by the territorial government. Why? I'd like to make a proposal. 1 year later, the sign above the main gate read, "Marsh Home for Children." What had once been Silas Vane's compound of exploitation had been transformed into a place of learning and healing. Evelyn stood in the doorway of the main classroom, watching her students work on their lessons. Rebecca sat at the front, helping younger children with their letters. Daniel, now 15, was teaching carpentry to a group of older boys. Sarah organized the library with the meticulous care of someone who understood the value of knowledge. The federal government had been surprisingly cooperative once the scope of Vane's network became clear. Public outrage over the child trafficking scandal had led to new laws protecting orphan children and increased funding for territorial education. The Marsh Home had become a model for how society should care for its most vulnerable members. "Penny for your thoughts." Greyhawk's voice came from behind her. Evelyn smiled without turning around. "Just thinking about how much has changed." Greyhawk moved to stand beside her, his presence as comforting as it had been in those dark days after the fire. He'd become the home's official coordinator, working with tribal leaders and government officials to ensure that rescued children could be placed with families who would truly care for them. "Catherine stopped by this morning," he said. "She wanted to see Rebecca." Evelyn nodded. Vane's widow had become an unexpected ally, using her knowledge of the trafficking network to help authorities identify and prosecute other conspirators. The reunion between Catherine and Rebecca had been painful but healing for both of them. How did it go? Difficult, but necessary. Rebecca needed to hear Catherine's side of the story to understand why she made the choices she did. Through the window, Evelyn could see children playing in the courtyard that had once been a work yard. Tommy was teaching Marcus how to throw a rope, while several of the rescued children played a complex game involving sticks and stones. They laughed and argued and scraped their knees like children everywhere. But she also saw the lingering shadows in some of their eyes, the way certain children still flinched at sudden noises or hoarded food in their pockets. The healing process would take time. Some of these children might never fully recover from what they'd endured. The Morrison report came in, Greyhawk said quietly. Evelyn's attention sharpened. Marshal Morrison had been investigating the full extent of the trafficking network, following leads across multiple territories. How many children? Over 300 in the past 5 years. Maybe more. Some of the records were destroyed. Greyhawk's voice was tight with controlled anger. They found 15 mass graves near mining camps in Colorado and New Mexico. The numbers hit Evelyn like physical blows. 300 children, 15 graves. Each number represented a life cut short, a future stolen, a family destroyed. "At least they found them," she said finally. "At least their families can have some closure. There's something else. Morrison thinks there are still active cells operating in California and Oregon. The network wasn't completely dismantled." Evelyn closed her eyes, feeling the weight of unfinished business. They had saved these children, exposed this particular operation. But the larger system of exploitation continued. Somewhere other children were suffering in conditions similar to what Rebecca and the others had endured. What do we do about it? We keep fighting. One child at a time, one operation at a time. We build networks of people who care, who are willing to stand up when they see injustice. Greyhawk paused and then pulled a letter from his pocket. This came today, from a teacher in Oregon. She's asking for help. Evelyn took the letter, her scarred left hand still stiff but functional enough for daily tasks. As she read, her expression grew grim. The teacher, Mary Richardson, described a situation disturbingly similar to what they'd encountered in Coyote Ridge: children disappearing after suspicious accidents, local authorities turning a blind eye, powerful businessmen involved in activities that didn't bear scrutiny. How far is Oregon? 3 weeks' travel, maybe more, depending on weather. Evelyn looked around the classroom again at the children who had become her world. The Marsh home was stable now, with other teachers and staff to help run it. These children were safe, healing, building new lives. But in Oregon, other children needed help. "Rebecca," she called, "could you come here for a moment?" The girl approached with curiosity, now 11 years old and taller than she'd been during those dark days in the compound. She'd grown into the intelligence and strength that had always been evident, becoming a natural leader among the home's children. What would you think if Greyhawk and I had to travel for a while to help other children who are in trouble? Rebecca considered this seriously. "Would you come back?" "Always. This is our home, all of us together." "Then you should go. Other kids need what we have. They need to know that someone cares enough to fight for them." The simplicity and wisdom of the statement took Evelyn's breath away. This child, who had suffered more than most adults, understood perfectly the larger mission they had committed themselves to. "There's something else," Rebecca said quietly. "I want to come with you." "Rebecca, I know what it's like to be trapped, to think no one cares. I can talk to kids in a way adults can't. I can help them trust you." Greyhawk and Evelyn exchanged glances. The girl was right. Her presence could be invaluable in gaining the trust of frightened children. "But the dangers?" "It would be dangerous," Greyhawk said. "We might be walking into situations like the compound again. All the more reason I should be there. You saved me, Miss Evelyn. You gave me a family, a home, a future. Let me help save others." As the sun set over the New Mexico prairie, casting long shadows across the courtyard where children played in safety, Evelyn made her decision. The fight was far from over, would perhaps never be truly over, as long as people existed who would exploit the vulnerable for profit. But that didn't matter. What mattered was that someone was willing to stand up each time to say, "Not here, not on my watch." What mattered was that children like Rebecca could grow up to become protectors instead of victims. "All right," she said finally. "We'll go to Oregon, all three of us." Rebecca's smile was radiant. "When do we leave?" "After we make sure everyone here will be taken care of. Family doesn't abandon family." As they walked back into the classroom together, Evelyn felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. But it was a good weight, a chosen weight. Somewhere in Oregon, children were waiting for rescue. They didn't know it yet, but help was coming. The fight for justice would continue, one child at a time. 5 years after the fire that destroyed Coyote Ridge, Evelyn sat at her desk in the rebuilt town's new municipal building, reviewing correspondence from across the Western Territories. The Marsh Home Network had grown to include facilities in 6 territories, with more planned each year. Her left hand, still bearing the scars from that long-ago fire, moved carefully across the paper as she wrote responses to teachers, marshals, and territorial officials who had reached out for help. The network Greyhawk had envisioned was becoming reality. A web of people committed to protecting vulnerable children wherever they found them. A knock at the door interrupted her work. "Come in." Rebecca entered, now 16, and serving as coordinator for the home's outreach programs. She'd grown into a poised young woman, but Evelyn could still see traces of the frightened 10-year-old who had first walked into her classroom. "The children are asking if you'll read to them tonight," Rebecca said. "It's story time." Evelyn smiled. Despite all their growth and expansion, some traditions remained constant. Every Thursday evening, all the children in the home gathered in the main hall for stories and songs. It was a time to remember that they were more than just an institution. They were a family. Of course, what would they like to hear? The new children want to hear about the fire, about how we all found each other. Evelyn nodded. It had become something of a legend among the home's residents, the story of how a devastating fire had somehow brought together a community of people who chose to be family. New children often found comfort in hearing that others had survived terrible experiences and found happiness again. As they walked toward the main hall, Evelyn could hear the sounds of children throughout the building, laughter from the play areas, serious discussion from the older student study groups, the patient voices of teachers helping with difficult lessons. The main hall was packed with children of all ages, from toddlers who had been rescued from truly horrible situations to teenagers preparing to make their own way in the world. Greyhawk sat near the back, surrounded by boys who hung on his every word about tracking and outdoor survival. "Gather around," Evelyn said, settling into the large chair that had become her storytelling throne. "Tonight we're going to talk about beginnings." A little girl, maybe 6 years old, recently rescued from a similar trafficking operation in Colorado, raised her hand tentatively. "Miss Evelyn, is it true that you used to be scared too?" "Oh yes, Emma. I was terrified. When the fire came, when I thought I might lose my students, when we had to fight the bad men, I was scared through all of it. But you did it anyway." "We did it anyway, all of us together. Being scared doesn't mean you can't be brave, it just means you're human." As Evelyn began the familiar story, she caught Greyhawk's eye across the room. He nodded slightly, understanding passing between them. Tomorrow they would leave for Wyoming, where reports had come in of children being used in illegal mining operations. Rebecca would come with them, as she always did now. The work was never finished. There would always be another operation to expose another group of children, to rescue another community to organize in defense of the vulnerable. But that was okay. The fight itself had become a source of meaning, a way to honor all the children they couldn't save by protecting the ones they could. And that, Evelyn concluded her story, is how we learned that the most important thing isn't where you come from or what terrible things happen to you. The most important thing is what you choose to do next, and who you choose to do it with. A boy near the front, one of the recent rescues from Oregon, raised his hand. "Miss Evelyn, will we always be safe here?" It was the question they all wanted, answered the fear that haunted every child who had learned too young that safety was not guaranteed. Evelyn chose her words carefully. "I can't promise that nothing bad will ever happen again. But I can promise that you'll never face it alone. We're family now, all of us. And families protect each other." As the children began to disperse for bedtime routines, Rebecca lingered behind. "Miss Evelyn, do you ever regret it? Leaving Boston, coming west, everything that happened?" Evelyn looked around the hall, seeing the echoes of all the children who had passed through these walls, some who had found loving families to return to others, who had chosen to stay and build new lives here, a few who had grown up to become teachers and advocates themselves. "Never," she said firmly. "This is exactly where I was meant to be." Outside, the New Mexico night was crisp and clear, stars scattered across the sky like scattered hope. Somewhere out there, other children were waiting for rescue. Other communities needed organizing. Other fights needed fighting. But tonight, these children were safe. Tonight, they knew they were loved. Tonight, they could dream of futures where they would be the ones protecting others. And that, Evelyn thought as she turned off the lights and headed to her own room, was how the world changed, one rescued child at a time, one chosen family at a time, one act of courage at a time. The fire that had destroyed Coyote Ridge had also been the spark that lit a movement. From its ashes had grown something far more powerful than any single school or town, a network of people committed to the radical idea that every child deserved safety, education, and love. The work would continue tomorrow and the day after that, and for as long as there were children who needed protection. But tonight, in the silence of the New Mexico prairie, Evelyn Marsh allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. They had won this battle, and they would keep winning one child at a time.